Hello, welcome to Quilt Snacks. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about cutting today. So I thought I'd make a little short video and maybe a little demo to show you how I organize and how I do my cutting. I do cut a lot of fabric because I sew a lot. So I also oftentimes teach people that are very beginners. So I thought it would be good if I could pass on some of the tips and tricks that I share with them also. So welcome. So today's Quilt Snacks is all about cutting. And I have quilts behind me that will show you different things that you know, kind of geared towards cutting multiples of the same pieces. And then the mermaid over there, which is now finished, and I'm working on the pattern. This one has all different kind of cuts, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I have a little demo set up for you to see how I do my cutting and my rotary cutting, and how I maybe fold my fabric. That works really well for me. Maybe it'll work well for you. It's a little awkward setup here with my camera because I'm going from the table, between the table to the design wall and back and forth. So you're going to have to kind of bear with me while I switch my camera and move this, iPad the other way. So I hope you're having a great time so far this week, and I will switch you over to... Here is some fabric that I've prepared that I'm working with, and I thought I would just show you on that. So this is a whole bunch of fabric that I've bought one time, and if you ever go to a quilt store, then sometimes when you buy more than a yard or two, they'll take their biggest ruler and they'll just wrap it around, and that is, a great way for them to fold the fabric and for you to take it home, but maybe not a great way for you to do your cutting. So let me just move this over here and show you what's going on. Let me zoom in a little bit. Do you see this little wrinkle here? That is definitely something that is going to be a problem when you cut, because if you cut over this wrinkle, it will make sort of a zigzag line in your cutting. And so that would definitely be something I would iron first. Also, if I can, I do not like to do really long cuts because it's tiring to lean forward and do a really long cut. And let's face it, not all of us have, arms that can reach or tables at the correct height. And speaking of table, not everybody has a cutting table. My room is so small, I don't have a cutting table. So this is actually the table for my sit-down machine for the free motion. And I've just taken and put a mat on there. So first of all, what kind of mat do you want? You want definitely a self-healing mat, and you want a mat that is as large as you have room for. And this one right here is 36 by 24, and that's about all I can get onto this part of the machine before I bump into the head of the sewing machine. So this is about as large as it gets. For my initial cuts, I really like that. For squaring up, I also like that. So let me show you how I will treat that fabric. So the first thing I would do, I would unroll everything, and then depending on the type of cut I make, I might fold it in half. So I'm going to show you that. So this is a fabric. Let me see if you can see it. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. This is a fabric that I've prepared for cutting. And if you see what I do, I actually take my fabric and fold it in half twice. So it's folded in half once, and this is how it comes folded along the fold. And then I will fold it again, and a lot of times I will press it, and then I will roll it up. Now I've rolled it up on this side, so I'm going to work on that. But what I like to do is I like to fold it in, I don't know, maybe 6 inches at a time, because that gives me kind of a folded area on one side. So it's not like a messy glob of fabric on the other side. I kind of try to keep it straight, okay? So my very first cut, let's say I want to do some 2.5 inch strips, and this is fabric that I folded twice, so in my estimation, those strips will be cross-cut. Now, if you're doing something that requires a strata where you have long strips that you sew together, you're probably better off using the longer rulers. So that's another thing. You want to kind of tailor your ruler to the type of cut you're doing. So this is a smaller ruler, but I thought you could see it really well. My aim is to cut 2.5-inch strips. So the first thing I have to be conscious of is there is kind of a edge here that is not necessarily very straight. So the very first thing I do is I'm going to scoot my ruler down, and down here there's those little markings, and right now I see the quarter markings. I'm lining them up with the initial, with the fold here. And my actual strip is wider than the 2.5 that I want. Why am I making my strip wider? Instead of doing a cutoff on one side to do the square up and turn the whole pack of fabric, I'm only going to have to turn one strip. There's an advantage to that, because each time you pick up a large pack of fabric with all these layers, what happens is it's much easier to be disturbed. So I just wanted to show you, maybe with another piece of fabric, or I'll show you where the 2.5 line is right here. Let me peek in here and see if you can see it. So the 2.5 line would be right here, and I actually am cutting a strip that is a little bit larger. And what I do is I equally distribute weight from my hand through my wrist to my hand onto the ruler, and then I open my blade. Each time I open it, and I take a little running start, and I gently lean forward into the cut. So this is my first cut. Right away I want to close my rotary cutter, and then I will, before I even move this hand, I'll see if this fabric moves freely, and if it does, then I know my cut was good. So this one is too wide because this was my cleanup strip, my cleanup cut strip, so to say. And so I'm going to put 2.5 inches on there, that whole line on the just cut edge. And then again, a little bit before the fabric starts. And I just go right along the edge of the rotary cutter, and this is left over and it'll be trash. And so this is the strip that I cut. If you can see, there are no frayed edges or anything. That is because my rotary blade was sharp. So it's real important that you have a rotary cutter with a sharp blade. If you have a dull blade, it'll be frustrating, and you're actually more likely to cut yourself with a dull blade because you're sawing over the same edge twice. Now sometimes what happens to me is I'm in the middle of something and I don't have any other rotary cutting blades, and maybe my rotary cutter has a nick. If that happens, let me do another strip for you. Let me see if that's in the picture here. Move it a little bit. Okay, so if that happens, what I will do is a little trick. So my trick is, first of all, I'm looking, is it still square? Yes, it is. And I'm going to take a little bit before the cut and move forward. Before I do anything else, I'm going to actually cut twice. Why? Because now, if there's a nick in the blade, most likely it will not hit at the same spot. So you can actually still have a pretty cutting flow, you know, where you can just cut one strip after another without having to worry about how to snip apart all these little pieces. Okay, so here are some of my strips. So what else is important? If you see, I really prefer to cut 4-ply. There's 4 pieces, 4 fabric layers, and this is what I prefer. I just feel like it gives me the best and the most accurate cut. Now, if you're cutting, for example, for the mermaid, and you have a piece that you have to cut down and make different sizes, then oftentimes, you know, you go to the 1-ply, and that's okay because you're just doing little pieces. And in that case, I actually sit down to do those little pieces. I only ever stand up for the strips, and sometimes I don't do that if I'm too tired to stand up. But let me show you on those 2 strips how I do a very fast cross cut. So cross cutting or sub-cutting means you have cut a strip and now you're further cutting it into pieces. So in that case, you can actually, which I never recommend using your mat for cutting strips or anything because the mat shifts and moves with all the cutting. But what I like to do is I like to use it for the setup. So I know that I want to do 2.5-inch strips. So actually I cut off I count off the pieces that I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 2 strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 2 strips. And whatever happens back there is not large enough. So I'm going to make sure that I have enough of a margin so I don't have any mistakes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it off using one of those lines. And it's still perpendicular because I have placed it along one of the horizontal lines. A little bit of a running start. And then I actually move these pieces. Now I'm going to cut actually 2.5-inch squares. So I'm going to just cut those squares and move those. And it's very quick to cut up a strip, as you can see. And if anything moves, you can just gently scooch it back into line. 2 more. So 2 strips. And I got 8 of those. And you can see what I like to do in that case, I just keep them in sets of 4s because I know that they're all in sets of 4s. So if I do a lot of strip cutting or cutting squares, that's what I will do. So I hope that's helpful to you. Now, I wanted to also add that if you're familiar with my technique, and I like to do my folded triangles that are from squares, if you take one of those squares and you fold it in half, you should only have to ever match the top largest 90-degree corner. Why is that? Because if you've cut accurately, it will fit right. It will just go right into the corners and it won't have kind of an awkward angle here. Well, what happens if you don't have that and, you press it with an iron? Let me get a little scrap here, for example. So here's a piece that is a clear rectangle. So what happens if you're not quite there for the square? So let me just kind of whack it a little bit off. So this is almost a square, but not quite. And when you go in the middle, this will not work. It won't go into the corners. So in that case, if you don't want to recut, I recommend that you start in one corner and then you still have something that, as long as it's less than 1/4 inch off here, that is usable and you don't have to redo everything that you do. So that's just a little trick that I do, because sometimes when I cut late at night and I'm tired, I make mistakes and I sometimes don't get the exact square. So let me turn you back around here. I wanted to see if you guys have any questions for me for cutting that I might be able to answer while we're online or while we're on Facebook. But if you don't, I just wanted to kind of tell you what happened one time. I had a student that no matter what her cutting was, it just wasn't coming out clean, and we couldn't figure out what it was. I tried her rotary cutter after a while, and I thought it just kind of feels funny, but I wasn't quite sure what was going on. So I took the rotary cutter apart, and what it was is she had recently changed her rotary blade, and now, you know how they stick together when you get them in a pack of 5? The rotary blades were actually stuck together. And so she had 2 rotary blades in her rotary cutter. And if that happens, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to get a really clean cut. And it wasn't that the cut was really off, but the cuts were sort of feathery looking, So it just never was quite the way she was used to it. And when we found that out, I thought that might be a good tip to pass along to you guys and let you know that that can happen. And maybe if it ever happens to you, you'll think of that and check how many rotary cutting blades you have in there. And speaking of rotary cutting blades, you should probably, if something is hard to cut and you don't get it with the first cut, you should probably change your blade. So in a future video, I was going to show you how I do my cross cutting for some of the strips that I use, because I actually place my ruler, one of those markings that needs to be perpendicular to the cut, on the sewing line and not on the outside of your strip set. That works really well and it makes it so much straighter and so much better. So I hope you had fun and you learned something new, and please send me your questions for future quilt snacks, and I'd love to show you more. So it's always nice to have the questions so I can come up with little little quilt snacks for you that you can learn something. What? Yeah, I know. I wait long too. I was actually looking for a blade to change. Maybe I should just take an old one. But I have about 20 old blades that I saved for cutting paper, which I do sometimes, but I certainly don't need 20 blades. And I have none of the new ones left, so I have to go shopping for blades too. And what I found out, there are actually blades that are made, they call them, I guess, endurance rotary cutting blades. I haven't tried one, but that's the one I'm going to get, and I'm going to see if I get more mileage out of my blades. And if I do, I will definitely let you guys know. So that is all for today. I hope you're having a great week and a great sewing week. We are having thunderstorms here, so I'm hoping to get a little sewing in because I certainly won't be going outside. So you guys have a great day, and I hope you like this. Share it with your friends. Maybe you have somebody that you know that is a new quilter that could benefit from some cutting tips. Please share it with them and let me know if you like it. So have a great weekend. Bye.